enjoyed today's webinar. Before we start, I just need to run you through a few housekeeping rules. If I can just move the slide over. You will know that this webinar is part of the HR Observers, our HR blog, which you can find online at www.thehrobserver.com. It's got loads of good content, and I just encourage you to visit it. Our housekeeping rules, just to keep the webinar moving smoothly. As you listen to Tom speaking, you might have questions. Please type your questions in the question box, which you'll see on the right of your control panel. Tom will then take these at the end of the session. He will allocate time to answer your questions. If there are too many questions and he can't answer them, then we will write them out and send them out to you in an email. So please don't worry about your question not being answered. We will be emailing the slides as well as the entire presentation in a follow-up email to you, and this will usually be done within the week. And all that is left for me to say is please do the survey when it pops up towards the end, and enjoy the webinar. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tom Raftery. As you can see from the attached, I've got a quite extensive experience of HR. Been in the business, been in it for over 30 years. Various roles, worked internationally as well as in the UK, worked for some companies such as British Aerospace, Edward Forbes, British Gas, and local family businesses in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, the NASA Group, which was a very interesting experience for me and a great company to work for. In addition, I've worked for what was Watson White, then is now Towers Watson, Arthur Andersen, and of course Merck. I first came to the Middle East in 1978. I haven't been here all the time, but I have been in and around the region quite a lot. I've just completed 6 years as a VP HR for a French multinational called ARC International, where I was responsible for over 4,500 people stretching from Japan through to Africa. So a lot of hands-on corporate experience as well as consulting experience. And I'd like to share that with you, particularly with today's presentation. HR directors on the board. That's interesting because the reality is that in fact, generally HR are not on the main board. If you look at the FTSE 100, they don't have a HR director on the main board. Which is sad really, because I think at the end of the day, people are now seen as the only sustainable means of competitive advantage. And as such, getting the people side right is particularly important. Overall, you've got to understand that the number of executives, if you look at the FTSE 100, on the main board are limited due to regulations and particularly the increasing use of non-executive directors. For that, you've got to understand HRDs and senior HR people are taken far more seriously at board level. They are consulted quite a lot on a number of issues, particularly leadership, succession, war for talent, creating the right organization structure in which the organization is going to be its most effective, and in particular building the right culture for people to work and to deliver to the maximum of their efficiency. And the other thing is HRDs now have been recruited from outside HR. They're bringing people in from other businesses who then surround themselves with experienced HR professionals. And many companies are finding that particularly useful because they feel that people from outside have a greater business knowledge and business nous. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later. I don't know how many people are operating at a senior level at the moment, or maybe you're just starting off your career or recently in a career and maybe you want to see how you would get onto a board. And I will talk about that a little bit later and on some of those issues. And finally, what you're finding is more high flyers have been placed in HRD roles. That's also happening in the region as well. HR is beginning to be seen as a critically important function that has to be manned effectively. So if you look at the influence of HR director on the board, I'm going to use some research here from Korn Ferry. basically in some research they did, I think it was in 2011, 43% felt that significantly increased HR's influence at the board directors. 29% said it slightly increased, 16% not changed, and only 8 and 5% said it actually decreased. So basically, HR was seen as important, and the influence of HR and the board directors seeking the views from the HR leaders is actually increasing quite significantly. Some other research I did as well was research carried out about how, and this was in the States, chief human resource officers compared with other directors or senior officers, and found some interesting research by Ellie Phillip, who's a senior client partner for Korn Ferry, and obviously specializes in recruiting HR people globally. And with obviously Dave Ulrich, which you all know, the HR guru from the University of Michigan. So the research they did, they looked at the pay levels of high-performing C-suite executives and looked particularly at those at the top decile of earners at that level. And they found that both the CEO and the COO were the highest paid. It's basically what you'd expect. But then the chief human resource officers were the next highest paid, which was, to them at the time, a bit of a surprise. Then they also looked at 360-degree assessments of executives against 14 aspects of leadership carried out by Korn Ferry. Now, obviously, Korn Ferry, as an executive search company, has a lot of access to information of C-suite executives. So they did the analysis of that data. And what they found, except for the COO, the executive who had traits or was most similar to the CEO was in fact the chief human resource officer. Again, an interesting trait. So they were concluding that more companies will consider HR people to fill the CEO position. And in part, if you look at some of the challenges that companies have, when you look at people are the only sustainable means of competitive advantage, and as such, you've really got to get that right. You've really got to have people who know how to get the best out of their employees, because that's the way they will, a company will win. Particularly these days, when you look at most companies, it's all about knowledge management, knowledge transfer. So people are becoming increasingly important, particularly for the talent war that is still a challenge for many CEOs, leadership and culture, and the issues that I talked about earlier. So I also looked at how HR can add profits, can improve profitability, and again looked at various research and some interesting facts. Companies that identify HR risks in their annual reports outperform their industry peers. So in other words, they're on top of the HR risks and able to address them. Companies where regularly review employee performance and consistently match performance and track it, linked into objectives and KPIs, have a better annual growth rate. And one thing I'm finding at the moment is that more and more companies are seeking help from one form in terms of training on how to establish objectives and KPIs. That's becoming a particular hot topic at the moment, and it's something that HR can add a lot of value to the organization. Also, companies have a higher percentage of goals aligned to the organization and actually achieve these goals, do better on financial metrics. So again, it's important that you get goals, objectives and KPIs clearly defined, clearly tracked and clearly delivered. You'll improve financial performance, and there's obviously strong linking with the performance appraisal and performance management system. Having a chief human resource officer correlated with the company's bottom line. So again, further research showing that HR can add value. And this was research taken from Fortune 500 by SuccessFactors. Now, what are some of the challenges? And again, this is me giving my view of 30 odd years. I don't think HR's there yet. My view, it's not strategic enough. It's getting there. It has evolved. But it has room to grow. It has room to go further in terms of getting involved in strategy and developing the business strategy. And unfortunately, that's because it's not viewed as a serious contributor. They're more interested in the financials and the operations and the marketing. But ultimately, if you don't have the people turning up for work doing excellent work, you're not really going to have a business that's going to achieve its targets. Also, HR gets caught up in a lot of the day-to-day stuff and seen as more being involved with the day-to-day issues and called upon to deal with problems and labour disputes and things like this. But also they're seen more as advisors than decision makers. If you're going to get involved in strategy, you've got to be seen as a decision maker. And I think that's in part because of the role that we have, because actually HR is delivered most effectively through directors and managers and supervisors in the organisation, with HR giving support. So yes, you can see the challenge there. They are primarily advisors and don't often get involved in decisions. And I think as I heard someone quote one, they're not in position to sort of bang the table and say, back me or sack me, which often you get CFOs, commercial directors and things like that doing. HR often takes more of a back seat in situations like this. And I think HR needs to proactively generate more conversations. You've got to get to the main board directors, understand their needs, understand what they want, and start talking about the business. I'm going to come on to this a little bit later and the importance of that. If you talk about the business, you'll actually get a long way within HR. And finally, what you're finding is a lot of HR positions now being filled by directors from other operational departments because they have more of an entrepreneurial flair, more of a commercial flair. And I suppose in a way, HR is common sense, but then sense is not common, particularly when we're dealing with people. And you can't please all of the people all of the time. But I've seen that happening more and more. I see these people coming in from outside and surrounding themselves with experienced HR professionals. But that sort of excludes HR people from getting to the top slot. That can be a challenge. What's the situation in the Middle East? I think what I do see is HR directors on divisional boards of multinationals. I do see that. In my last role, I was on the board of a multinational divisional board, and that was part of my role of contributing to strategy. I think generally from the basic information, there's only a handful of companies where HR is on, is on the main board, and I think that's partly because HR in the region is still seen as highly administrative, at best tactical, and again, it's not seen as strategically important. But I do see it's changing. I do see HR, when they're getting involved in such discussions of performance management, talent, leadership, and things like this, it's been taken seriously at the board level, right? And also, I think there's a growing number of high performers within HR. I've certainly been around now. I have my own consulting business, and I get to meet a lot of HR people, and there's some real good quality people, particularly Emiratis out there. And whilst years ago it was always said that, well, if you can't do anything, you've got nowhere to put them into HR. That is changing, and I do see a lot of high performers moving into HR. I think if we look at some of the issues, war for talent is still a problem here. Recruiting the right people, obviously nationalisation are key challenges at the board level, and HR needs to be up there having those discussions, as I said, with the other board members, and giving them solutions that will help them to make sure the business achieves its strategy. Now I'm going to be talking about what you can do to get on the board as a HR person. And I want to quote some research carried out by the Cipd on research about business savvy. Business savvy meaning that you're more commercially aware, you understand the business. And what they said is you've got to do 4 things, and to a certain extent I'll repeat some of these when I go into some of the issues and things that you've got to do. First of all, you've got to understand the business model of your organization. If you don't understand your business, please go out there and understand what makes it tick. Understand the business drivers. Understand how it makes money, how it makes profit. Understand the financials. Absolutely critical. You've got to generate insight and impact through data. And here, this is about HR analytics. There's a lot of work done in collecting quite an extensive amount of information that we have on our employees held on our ERP type systems. And it's pulling that information together to show how HR can really contribute to business success. And the move to HR analytics is increasing. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Connecting and collaborating with curiosity. Always wonder what's happening. Don't accept what you see as fait accompli. Be curious about every part of the business. The new businesses get to understand why they're doing it, what they're doing. Talk to people, connect to them, provide solutions, collaborate and work with them, and push yourself into discussions around strategy. That's what it's all about. And obviously leading with integrity. You've got to, in many ways, be whiter than white and hold up the mirror to some of the board members. And this could be career limiting, because ultimately you've got to lead with integrity. You've got to show the right way to treat people, and to be, to show the company and to the general public as a good employer. So this was the work carried out, researched by the Cipd in 2012. So, what do you need to do to get a seat on the board? Okay, here's some of my views, and this has also been supported by the research that I've already talked about. I think the first thing is deliver on the basics. If you deliver on the basics, you pay people on time, you've got a good performance management system, you've got good learning and development, you've got a good career development, succession planning, leadership. If you deliver on those 100% of the time, people will listen to you, they'll respect you, and they'll respect the HR function. What tends to happen is we get a lot of the basics wrong. So you've really got to focus on that. Focus on efficiency, focus on delivering the service that HR promises, and that to me is absolutely critical. Then understand the business drivers. You've really got to know the business, get out there, get to speak to managers, directors, get to speak to the employees. In my last job, I spent 2 days working on the line to understand what it's like to work there. I went out on sales calls, although the salespeople didn't particularly like it, because I've had to sell. I started to get in to understand the business. What's the drivers? Where's the profit? What's the markets? What products are we trying to sell to what markets? I got involved in that, and that gave me more understanding of the business, and therefore I could contribute outside of the human resource area on discussions around business strategy. And in fact, I remember in my last job at ARC International, the CEO said I was the most commercially focused HR director he's ever seen, because everything I did, I put it in the context of what's it going to do for the business. And that's critically important. You have to get the numbers. You've got to understand the financials. Please, it's something that is critically important, because if you can talk about the financials, and in particular when you're making recommendations to start new initiatives, to work on what HR is contributing, you've got to be able to pull out the figures. Work with finance, build some assumptions of what you're doing, but get some figures in terms of, if you do this, this is the impact on the bottom line. Because the CEO, you talk to them about training and leadership and succession planning and competencies, and they're all saying, yeah, I know what you mean, but in the back of their mind they're saying, what's it doing for my bottom line? If you're able to talk on the financial impact of what you're doing, you will have a lot of people listening to you, and they will want to have you next to them, and that means on the board. So and one interesting thing, I'm presently running a small workshop on finance for strategic HR, and unfortunately I would like to have seen 15 plus people there. In fact, there's only a handful. What's that saying? It's saying that finance people, that HR people are frightened of the financials and on the figures. If you do that, you will not get anywhere near the board, and you won't really improve your career. Get to understand the financials, get to understand that, the dynamics of how the financials drive the business. That is absolutely critical and has to be done. Okay, you also need to experience outside. If you've got an opportunity, and some of you are starting off in your careers or a few years in, get some experience in an operational department. Get outside of HR. Try to take a non-executive director. So if you can't go out into operational roles, if you're reasonably senior, try to get a non-executive director role. They don't have them too much here within the region, but you can also get a HR advisor to the board in some organizations as a separate director that they will employ. So get some operational experience, and non-executive director experiences as well as important. Measure outcomes and achievements. You've got to be looking at what's your objectives, What's your KPIs and what are you delivering? And you've got to make sure that you capture that, you measure it, and make sure that you try to put those within the context of a financial impact. You know, a lot of HR people are focused on processes, which is very important, but it's about delivery. The important thing about HR is deliver, and you've got to deliver at every stage. We've got to master the HR analytics. It's a topic that's becoming very, very popular, and this is really saying, with all the data we have on our employees, how can we pull that data and aggregate that data together to start to help us to make decisions? Don't forget, if you look at all the other areas, marketing, finance, operations, have all got lots of data to help them make decisions. We tend to say, well, you know, we need to do this because it's the right thing to do. No, you're going to need data. You're going to have to pull in a lot of big data and manage that and aggregate it so it helps to support your arguments that you're putting forward for changes or for new initiatives. There's a recent survey brought out by the Cipd. I was at a presentation the other day of how HR analytics is growing in the region. It's still very embryonic, as it is to a certain extent in the developed world, but it's something that I would say to all of you. If you want to get on the board, get to understand HR analytics, how you use data and information to support your arguments, and then how you get hold of that data and aggregate it to build a story. The other point is talk the language of the CEO on the board. You know, in HR we tend to talk behavioral type language. Whilst that is important in terms of understanding it, you do need to have that commercial focus. Talk about what it's going to do for the bottom line. Talk about what it's going to do for sales. Talk about what it's going to do to improve operational efficiencies, reduce costs, improve quality, etc., etc. Talk commercial language. Don't talk behavioral, because that's what switches people off. And finally, build confidence through knowledge. You've got to go out there and look at what's happening. In fact, when I talked about the numbers issue, and I'm running this program at the moment, I asked the people in the group, how many people read the business pages of the newspapers? None of them did. How many people read the annual report and looked at the balance sheet and understood it? None of them did. You've really got to go out there and understand what's happening to your business, understand the financials, understand the market. You've got to be able to look around corners. You've got to be able to look at what's happening. And that's about accumulating knowledge. If you build your business knowledge, then please do so. I'll be honest, I've seen people who've done MBAs in HR. Please do not do that. You get an MBA because it gives you tools about the business. And if I see so many people here with MBAs, yet I don't see any difference in their language or how they're putting their business cases and solutions forward. So please get an MBA that's going to talk about business. So, some concluding remarks here. I think all the previous points about getting on the board, many of you, and I don't know who you are, maybe sort of a junior level or medium level in HR, they all apply to you. Whether you're what level you are or whether you want to get on the board, you've got to follow these points. Okay? You need to apply this in your work regardless of your levels. You know, understand the financials, understand the business, talk the language. You can start doing that now. But you're also going to need drive and hunger to succeed. You know, that's critically important. But the big challenge there is make sure that you don't start getting too arrogant and you start losing sight. What I tend to see in the HR community, the CEO says jump, and you know, the HR person says how high. You've also got to stand up for yourself, and I think to a certain extent that means taking yourself out of your comfort zone. You've got to try a couple of things. You've got to frighten yourself. You'll make some mistakes, but you'll learn that way. And I think in HR, if you keep focusing on the business, but also focusing that what HR has to deliver, you'll be in a far better place. You've got to influence the right people. Have you got a good influence map? Do you know the key people in the organization that you've got to build relationships with, that you've got to be able to be on their radar in terms of a person who's doing the right stuff? Put HR solutions in financial terms. Try to talk money. Try to talk about the financial impact. And if you have difficulty defining that, what you do is define, well, what would the financial impact be if you didn't do it, which is looking at it from a different way. But seriously, try to work on those and work with finance. Start working on some assumptions, test those assumptions, work with finance, and get the backing of them on that. That will be really helpful. And you're going to have courage. You've got to have courage. You've got to be able to challenge. You've got to be able to stand up. And I think you will do if you find the right sort of organisation that will listen and appreciate what you're doing. That's all the points I have to say now. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to type in your questions now, and I will repeat the question to everyone and get back to you. Okay, I have a presenter. Yeah. Okay. I've got a person who appreciates the presentation. The question, and it pertains to the difference in female and males getting a seat on the board. I agree with you. Unfortunately, the bias is towards males, particularly in the region. But don't forget, they've been trying to change the ratios of the numbers of females on boards in Europe, the UK, the States, and they're still struggling to achieve that. I think from a figure I saw, there was only something like 15% of board members are actually female. To be perfectly honest, I've worked with some really bright women at senior level, and I see no reason why they can't take a seat on the board. Again, it's one of those glass ceilings that's slowly starting to change. I think it might be a while before we do it here, but I've seen some very, very bright females, particularly nationals as well. And I think it's a matter of time. It'll get there, but it's going to be slow. Keep pushing your argument. People will listen. People will look beyond whether you're a male or a female if you present your arguments rightly and you're able to talk about the business. Don't make the decision based on that. Any other questions? You agreed with me. So don't hold back if you're a female. It's just probably going to be a more difficult walk up to the summit, but go for it, please. Another question. Okay. Someone's put in that they've got a bachelor's degree from the US and they've been in HR for over 11 years and consider doing an executive education program. What would you recommend? I have to say an executive education program can be a whole range of things, from courses at INSEAD and Harvard and whatever. I did my MBA at Warwick University, and I think if you're going to do an MBA, please pick the good ones. There are so many schools out there providing MBAs. You've really got to go for something in the top 10 or 15. Select some of those. It's going to be hard work. I did mine part-time. God damn it, it killed me. But I learned a lot from it, and it was very, very good. I subsequently, interestingly enough, ran a business, construction business, would you believe? You know what? I learned more running that construction business than I ever did on the MBA. But what the MBA does, it gives you a framework, it gives you templates, and it gives you the knowledge to ask the questions. So my view would be to go for an MBA, but then there's a lot of very good executive education programs out there. Okay, another question. Aren't CFOs in a better position to take on the role of the CEO? And the other question, how do we compete with that level of analytics? Okay, in a way, yes, but you know they've got a handle on the financials. You can get a handle on the financials. How? If you look at all the companies and the real successful companies from Google, Microsoft, Apple, what's made the difference? It's the people that's made the difference. It's their ideas and what they've done with it. You don't hear about the financials. You hear about the financials when they go wrong, but you hear about the financials when they achieve growth in sales, in revenue and profit. So if you get the right people doing the right thing, coming up with new ideas, coming with innovative ideas, right, and putting the right sort of strategies and structures in place, yes. But what you've got to do, this is where HR analytics is increasingly important because you're able to pull out information to back up the behavioral side of people, right? So you've really got to get a handle on that. And there's a lot of information out there, from information on employee turnover, employee satisfaction. I mean, some study was done 20 years ago where you compare employee satisfaction with customer satisfaction. So work with marketing on getting that information, and then shareholder satisfaction. Because ultimately that's what the business is about. It's about shareholders, it's about customer, it's about people. The financials is just the water that flows in between these three pillars. And if you get those right, I actually believe in the next 2 decades you're going to see HR directors become CEOs, providing they get a handle on the financials and understand the business. When would you offer another finance for HR? Good, you're listening to us. I'm not sure when the next one is. I know it's a Sherm-based course because I'm a certified Sherm trainer. And yes, we will be running another one. But please, I was disappointed with the numbers because people are frightened of finance. Take yourself out of the comfort zone and learn financial management and how that can help you within HR. So I think there's another program, I'm not quite sure when, but there is another program going to run this year. So if you get on the Informal website, you'll see that. Oh, very good. The person who had it has already got their PHR under Sherm. Okay. Any more questions? What I would say in conclusion, I've just got one more question to answer, is do read your financial reports, do talk to people from finance, ask them questions, be inquisitive, be curious, as the Business Savvy report said, about the financials and how they work. Finance people love talking about the figures. You need to get comfortable with them, as well as understanding commercial drivers, so sales, products, etc., etc. Another question is coming in, is Sherm or Cipd more valuable? I'm actually a certified trainer for the Cipd. They're both very good. I think it gives you a framework on which to build your HR expertise. I think you can choose either. One of the major differences, the Cipd has various levels, as does Sherm, but relies more on sort of case, sort of essay type work, and there's some case study, and I think you have to do a dissertation at the very end when you're level 7. Sherm, a lot of them are questions, multiple choice questions for the exams that you have to take. So it's just a different way of testing your learning. I think both of them are very good. They do still to be, Sherm's very US centric, Cipd is still very UK centric. So the aspects there on employee relations, labour law on both of those courses is not of real value to you. But in other words, one thing I always say, the labour law here, you could drive a train through it. But so if you look at other countries in terms of the labour laws they have, that would help you to sort of understand how you should be managing people, even though you don't have to because the labour law here doesn't specify. So I'd go for either. Any more questions? Okay, I'd like to, one more, thank you, excellent. Okay, thank you very much for that. Please go out and make a difference. What we need is HR people who are going to do things differently, who are going to understand the bit, get under the skin of the business and talk about the business, and you'll do well, you'll get to the top. And I want to see more HR people get to the top and become CEOs. And I hope at least amongst this group of people who are here, 1 or 2 of them will achieve that. Thank you very much for your participation. Go away and make a difference. Thank you.